Hey everyone, it's Evan the Paramedic Coach back here with another podcast episode. This one is all about the NREMT exam and the biggest mistakes I have seen students make. As you know, as a paramedic coach, I'm always getting messages from students. Maybe they came off a fail attempt and they need help and they're seeking my guidance. That's why I made Paramedic Coach, to help you pass NREMT. Now, I'm going to go through the biggest mistakes that I've seen. And here's mistake number one. So mistake number one is taking way too many practice questions, and I'll include a little bonus with number one, doing way too many different study plans and way too many different apps. Maybe you know this student who has 5, 6, 7, 8 different apps, and they're all trying to study at once on all of them. That gets you nowhere. And the second part of it is the person that takes too many practice test questions. There is a place for practice test questions. So for example, in my NREMT prep resource, the Video Vault, I do include practice test questions. I do. But those practice test questions show you the why behind the videos in the actual course that I have, right? So there's a reason behind it. You're evaluating, did you comprehend the education that I gave you or not, right? That's the goal behind it. And if you do well on it, you comprehended, great. If you didn't, you go back and study more. The problem with practice test questions is if they're too easy, they can give you false hope. The other problem on the secondary side is people are just blasting questions off, hundreds of questions a day, and it just becomes information overload. And then they feel confident, but then they don't know their weaknesses because they're just taking question after question and they're not understanding the why. They're not writing down the answers they got wrong and why they got them wrong. Or the worst case, they're going off of memorization, trying to memorize questions. Ugh, that is like the worst. That we do not want to do that. It's very simple, folks. To pass NREMT, you need to know your stuff. Quite simply. There's 5 sections and you gotta know them. Airway, respiration, ventilation, cardiology and resus, trauma, EMS ops, and medical OBGYN. And you gotta know them at a certain level to pass the exam. And that's how I train my students as the paramedic coach. So that's mistake number one. And this second mistake is at the paramedic level. And I see this a lot, so I really want to bring this up. Paramedics who fail, almost exclusively I've seen this, get below passing or near passing in cardiology, and that's why they fail. So if you are a paramedic and you are not up to par with your cardiology and pharmacology, folks, literally, cardiology, EKGs, 12-lead EKGs, cardiac emergencies, how to treat them, what are the signs and symptoms, that's literally the hallmark of being a paramedic. Your meds and your cardiology. That's what separates you from advanced EMT, like all your cardiology and pharmacology, right? So if you're weak in that, you're not going to pass the paramedic exam, guaranteed. And I've seen time and time again where, and I'll be honest with you, it's really unbelievable. A student will get through paramedic school, they'll come to me and say, hey, I failed NREMT. I look at their result. They got below passing cardiology. We'll go back and forth about a little bit of cardiology, and they're way behind. They're at where a paramedic student might be, but they somehow got through school. And that's why I say not every school, not every instructor, unfortunately, will train to the same levels. Depending on what school you're at, you could be at a disadvantage. Another reason why I created Paramedic Coach, to bring up the students that need it and then give the review to those that were at that level that just need the review, right? So when we're talking about cardiology, everything with EKGs and everything with 12-lead EKGs, you need to know cold. If we see an EKG, how we treat it, think about your ACLS and PALS. That's what we're talking about here. Cardiology and resus. You have to have that down. If you know you're weak in that, I want you to study for a longer period of time on that, especially at the paramedic level. The next big mistake I see, and it gets to me so much when I see this, is a student fails NREMT, and then NREMT gives you 15 day window you have to wait in order to go back and take your test again. Instead of taking longer to study this time, as soon as they can go back and take it again, they take it again and they fail again because they did the same stuff that they did last time. If you had a fail attempt, you have to either change your study plan or study for longer. But you gotta do something, either length of studying or change the plan a bit. Even if you tweak it just a little bit. But you can't do the same exact plan after you failed. So either make it longer or change it. And this is what I can really want to stress. If you're one of the students who are unfortunately at NREMT, got below passing in every single area, I highly encourage you to study for at least 30 days minimum before you get back in and choose one study plan and go all in on it for a minimum of 30 days and hyper focus on it. Of course, it's normal to take a few days off. Of course, I'm saying 30 days straight, but I'm saying at least give yourself 30 days. I don't want you to rush back in. So that's the biggest mistake I see, and it really gets to me because that student may have really trained hard in those 2 weeks, but they needed more time. So please give yourself time and don't rush through study plans that whatever program you use. Don't rush through their study plan. Make sure that whatever study plan you have, you give yourself time. And I always tell my students, like for example, they're in my Video Vault NREMT prep, go through it at least twice and go through the quizzes at least twice. That way you know you've gone through it and you comprehend it. Another pitfall I see with studying in general, but obviously has to do with the NREMT, is studying in a way that doesn't work for your learning style. So, for example, me personally, I don't learn well from reading textbooks, right? That's not how I learn. I'm very visual and I'm very audio, and that's how I learn, right? Hence the paramedic coach, right? Now, one thing you want to look at is what study resource are you using? Does it vibe with the way that you learn, right? So this is why I talk so much about video and audio, because I know a lot of you absorb video and absorb audio on a daily basis. You're used to absorbing that. So if you have a study material that is video and audio based, it's also a mobile way to study. You can get more studying in even on the go. That may be better for you than, maybe you have a friend who loves reading or is really great and then they can read the whole textbook. That's fantastic. That's not me. That might not be you. So you might want to look at a resource that helps you in that regard and helps with your learning style. I've seen people tell me, I'm trying to read the book. But I just don't get it. One size does not fit all when it comes to studying. I remember back when I went to paramedic school, I barely opened the book because I knew that I learned visual audio. So you know what I did? And I talk about it a lot. When I was in paramedic school, I had my cell phone and I had a great, amazing instructor. Shout out to, Mr. Daniel Talbert, a fantastic instructor. And I would record his lectures while he was lecturing. So then when I commuted and I was driving and I was studying at home, I just popped in the headphones, popped in the car, and just listened to him all day long. And that's how I got through all my tests and quizzes. And that's how I got my information. Because obviously he said it's going to be on the quiz. So that's one way of doing it as well. Now, we talked a lot about content, some strategy, stuff like that. What I want to talk about now is the actual NREMT questions themselves, because it is an important part of it. So let's talk about that. So this is what I share with my students on how to best go through and dissect the NREMT questions. Number one is I've never had one student of mine run out of time with the exam. So do not rush the questions. What I will say, though, is you want to go with your gut. A lot of times when we second guess ourselves, we get it wrong. So if you have a gut feeling, go for it. But listen to my advice here. before you do this. So hang with, look, check this out. Here it is. You have your question. What I tell my students to do is read through the entire question once. Pause for a second, let it sink in. Visualize that scene. Visualize that scenario. If it's a scenario-based question, right? If it's a simple definition, or what is this, or whatever, answer, right? Now, if we have a scenario and a scene question, visualize it, see it, give yourself a few seconds. Then what I want you to do is I want you to reread the question again, looking at any sort of pertinent information and trying to dissect the fluff from the pertinent information, right? Then look at your last line. What are they asking you? Now, notice I haven't mentioned looking at the answers yet. Now look at the answers. And now start to do your elimination method, knowing it's definitely not that, definitely not that. Okay, that's it, right? And obviously in your head, if you already know what the answer probably is going to be, and then there it appears, boom, jump on that boy, right? Make sense? So what I don't want you to do, and what a lot of people do, I'll give you a great example here, is a famous question. You have someone who is suffering stroke-like symptoms, and people think, oh, stroke-like symptoms, okay, clear cut. I'm going to call a stroke alert right now from the field. But in the question, you never took a blood glucose. So remember, no stroke is a stroke until you take a blood sugar, right? So this is one thing I talk about a lot in the video vault in my NREMT prep course, is knowing the steps. So I'll give you another one here that you can think about is airway steps. So if you have an airway question, where are you on the steps? So the first step is you got to open the airway. Is it head tilt chin lift? Is it going to be jaw lift maneuver, right? The next thing is we got to clear the airway. So do we hear gurgling, or do we hear a need, or is there a need for suctioning, like blood or vomit? Got to suction the airway. Next, we got to keep the airway open. So we keep the airway open with, it could be an OPA, it could be an NPA as a adjunct. The next step is we got to ventilate the patient. So that's our BVM attached to oxygen, right? So the steps are open, clear, keep, ventilate. So if you have already suctioned, the next step is, the answer is to keep it open. So it's OPA, NPA. If you've done everything but aren't ventilating yet, then it's ventilate. Now the answer is not, if you haven't even opened the airway yet, the answer is definitely not going to be to ventilate, right? So, that is what we're looking at with stepwise fashion. And I try to use this stepwise fashion in, kind of whatever we're trying to do, right? So, we use mnemonics when we think critically, but then we have steps that we just need to know, obviously, to work in EMS. So, hope that makes sense. And I hope this podcast was helpful to you getting ready for your NREMT exam. And I will catch you on the next podcast. Let's go. Now, a lot of you asked in the comments about how to prepare for school, how to get through school, and how to pass NREMT. The first link in the description is a study tool that I give to all my students to accomplish all of that. It's called the Video Vault. Inside the Video Vault is over 480 videos of content, audio files, worksheets, practice quizzes, our community group. What I do in the Video Vault is take all the concepts you need to know to pass school at NREMT, and I break them down simply for you, so that way you just follow along with the videos, you follow the study plan, and you pass. I give my students lifetime access in the first link in the description, and I'll see you on the inside.